Yesterday, there was a clip that went around about, it was Rand Paul and Dr. Anthony Fauci kind of going back and forth. And I want to take a look at Rand Paul and what he said. And then I'm going to come back and give you my thoughts on what he said to Fauci. We're not going to go over Fauci's part because it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty explanatory. There's really no reason to go over it. He's pretty sound on everything he said.
It's important because, in all likelihood, is a good way of putting it, the vast majority of these people will have immunity. Instead of saying there is no evidence, the WHO kind of fed into this by saying no evidence of immunity. And in reality, there's every evidence stacking up. And in fact, a lot of the different studies have shown that it is very unlikely that you get it again in the short term. With regard to going back to school, one thing that was left out of that discussion is mortality. I mean, shouldn't we at least be discussing what the mortality of children is? This is for Dr. Fauci as well. The mortality between 0 and 18 in the New York data approaches 0. It's not going to be absolutely 0, but it almost approaches 0. Between 18 and 45, the mortality in New York was 10 out of 100,000. So really, we do need to be thinking about that. We need to observe with an open mind what went on in Sweden, where the kids kept going to school. The mortality per capita in Sweden is actually less than France, less than Italy, less than Spain, less than Belgium, less than the Netherlands, about the same as Switzerland. But basically, I don't think there's anybody arguing that what happened in Sweden is an unacceptable result. I think people are intrigued by it, and we should be. I don't think any of us are certain when we do all these modelings. There have been more people wrong with modeling than right. We're opening up a lot of economies around the U.S., and I hope that people who are predicting doom and gloom and saying, oh, we can't do this, there's going to be a surge, will admit that they were wrong if there isn't a surge, because I think that's what's going to happen. In rural states, we never really reached any sort of pandemic levels in Kentucky and other states. We have less deaths in Kentucky than we have in an average flu season. It's not to say this isn't deadly, but really outside of New England, we've had a relatively benign course for this virus nationwide. And I think the one-size-fits-all that we're going to have a national strategy and nobody's going to go to school is kind of ridiculous. We really ought to be doing it school district by school district, and the power needs to be dispersed because people make wrong predictions. And really the history of this, when we look back, will be of wrong prediction after wrong prediction after wrong prediction, starting with Ferguson in England. So I think we ought to have a little bit of humility in our belief that we know what's best for the economy. And as much as I respect you, Dr. Fauci, I don't think you're the end all. I don't think you're the one person that gets to make a decision. We can listen to your advice, but there are people on the other side saying there's not going to be a surge and that we can safely open the economy, and the facts will bear this out. But if we keep kids out of school for another year, what's going to happen is the poor and underprivileged kids who don't have a parent that's able to teach them at home are not going to learn for a full year. And I think we ought to look at the Swedish model, and we ought to look at letting our kids get back to school. I think it's a huge mistake if we don't open the schools in the fall. Thank you.
So much of that wasn't that bad, honestly. Much of it wasn't, crazy lunacy, conspiracy, or wrong information. But I just want to touch on a few points where I think he was inaccurate or just off the mark, wrong on what he was saying. So when it comes to he talks about the immunity, and we just don't know the immunity. We don't know because we don't have the amount of testing that we need. So we don't know who's been infected and who hasn't been infected, and because we still aren't where we need to be as a nation on testing. All the greater majority of the health officials say we need to be on the low end. We need to be at 250K tests a day. That's the low end. Most of them say about double that, about 500,000 tests a day. We are just now reaching 250K tests a day consistently. For about the last 13, 14, about 2 weeks or so, we've averaged around 250 tests a day. For about 2 weeks, that's about it. That's what we've averaged. It's taken us this long. So we don't, I'm sure there are a lot of people who have been infected and now are immune to it, and they're not going to catch it again in the short term. Like most viruses, that's how it works. But we can't get there unless we have the adequate testing, and we do not. And that is a massive failure of this country from a federal level. And then he talks about schools and getting the kids back to school. And in the fall, not having them go back would be the mistake. And the low death rate with kids. Does Rand not realize that there's not just kids in schools? Like, who teaches the kids? Who keeps the kids in line? Who runs the office? These are all adults who are going to constantly become in contact with the kids who may be vectors for the disease. And then if the teachers and the administration get sick and ill, who's going to be there to teach the kids and keep them in line and make sure things go smoothly? Like, that's just makes no sense that you would even say that. And the only part where he's right is I do think, each state, each county within the states are going to have to kind of tailor their restrictions or lack thereof based on what's going on in that state. Yeah, there probably isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all for the entire nation. It's too big of a country for something like that to take place. So that is one aspect where he probably is correct. Then he, for some reason, throws in Sweden again, as in Sweden is the control group we want to be looking at. He just cherry picks the data there because if you compare Sweden to the other Scandinavian countries, they're far worse in deaths, in infected. So it doesn't even. He just picks a few countries that are doing better than, like UK and Italy and Spain. Their deaths per 1 million are more than us here in America. As a matter of fact, based on the numbers today, as I've looked at them today, if we had the deaths per 1 million that Sweden has, the U.S. would have over 113,000 deaths currently. If our deaths per 1 million were the same as Sweden's, we would have over 113,000 deaths. That's more than 29,000 deaths than we currently have. That's not a good thing. That wouldn't be a good thing. It's not this. We can stop pointing to Sweden now as like the model we want to be striving for here, because they did minimal social distancing and it hasn't led to catastrophic events in Sweden. Yes, for sure, but it hasn't led to good outcomes. Again, if you compare them to the other Scandinavian countries, you'll quickly see that they are far and away worse when it comes to deaths. So we have to stop doing that. People, please stop using Sweden as some like beacon of light that we should be following. We should be following South Korea is what we should be following. That should be the beacon. That should be the light at the end of the tunnel that everyone's looking for. And then he throws in the flu with Kentucky cases. My God, we really have to stop. The flu is not an apt comparison to COVID-19. It's just not, okay? We have over 84,000 dead in this country in a little less than 4 months, with schools being closed and everything, and Disney and restaurants and social gatherings and concerts and events being canceled. We have more than the worst year worth of flu deaths in the last 10 years in less than 4 months. Stop comparing the two. Just stop it. And again, I'll grant them the fact that in certain cities, in certain counties, there's going to be different outcomes than we're seeing in, like, let's say New York, for instance, or New Jersey or something like that. Yes, because there's so many other things at play. There's population density, there's cities, there's people who certain areas of the country who may actually adhere to the social distancing more than others. There is, impoverished areas that are probably going to be hit harder. There's just the randomness of viral spread too. The randomness that goes on. There might be some areas that it ends up killing more and some areas that it doesn't. So there's so many other variables that go into it that, of course, not every area is going to see the same level of death and infected rate than others, regardless of what goes on in that area. And then he attacks Fauci on the economy. Fauci has never once said anything about the economy and what we should be doing about stimulus packages or unemployment or anything of that sort. He's never said anything like that. So this is a complete straw man that he builds up from Fauci and then attacks it, when Fauci has never once done anything like that. He gives recommendations on what we should do health-wise, and then, of course, that has a cause and effect to the economy, obviously. But he's not telling you this is what we should do in terms of the economy. He's telling you this is what we should do health-wise, and then those health ramifications have effects on the economy. So that's just an awful look by Rand Paul, attacking the man who's devoted his entire life to fighting diseases and saving lives. And in this situation, he's been a godsend. And the fact that you would build up a straw man on him and attack him for it is just, it's typical Rand Paul. Like, this is the same guy who tested positive, or was actually waiting for his test results of COVID-19 to come back, and was using the gym for the senators there in Washington. So, I mean, what else do we expect from Rand Paul? Libertarians, is this your king?